The paperwork was already signed, 72 hours left, and the most dangerous dog in the facility had just gone completely still for the first time in 2 years. Nobody could explain it. Nobody except maybe the man standing in the parking lot, looking up at the building like he was settling something inside himself that had been unsettled for a long time. The truck pulled in just after 2 in the afternoon. No driver, no assistant, no security detail waiting by the entrance with an earpiece and a clipboard. Just Denzel Washington, a gray hoodie worn soft at the elbows, dark jeans, a pair of white Air Force Ones that had gone slightly yellow at the sole the way shoes do when someone wears them because they are comfortable and not because they are new. He stood beside the truck for a moment, with his hand still on the door handle. The March sun in San Antonio was the kind that pressed down on your shoulders, warm and direct and not interested in your plans. He looked up at the sign above the entrance, Lone Star K9 Rescue and Rehabilitation Center. He had been here before, not in body. In the conversation he had kept turning over since November, since the phone call at 11 at night when Elijah Cooper's voice came through the line thin and deliberate, the voice of a man rationing what he had left. Elijah Cooper, Staff Sergeant, First Class, United States Army. Retired K9 handler, 2 deployments to Afghanistan, a left leg that never fully came back from Kandahar, and a pair of eyes that carried what no VA prescription had ever quite reached. Denzel had met him in December of 2004 at Brooke Army Medical Center on a Tuesday afternoon that had no cameras and no press release attached to it. They had sat together in a small room for 47 minutes. Someone had given them bad coffee in paper cups. Denzel had written his phone number on the back of a hospital brochure, and Elijah had folded it into his shirt pocket without making a thing of it. They stayed in contact for 22 years after that. Not frequently, but honestly, the kind of contact that does not need frequency to be real. Elijah died in December of last year. Cirrhosis, 61 years old. 3 weeks before he died, he called Denzel at 11 at night. His voice was the way voices get when the body is running on what it has decided to spend on this last necessary thing. He told Denzel about the dog. His son Marcus had been a K9 handler too. Had followed his father into the army the way some sons follow a road their fathers walked, not out of obligation, but out of something quieter and more chosen than that. Marcus had worked with a Belgian Malinois named Shadow for 4 years. Drug detection, tracking, high-risk apprehension. Decorated twice. His handler's record was, by all accounts that reached Elijah through the channels that reach fathers, exceptional. Marcus was killed in Helmand Province in 2021. Shadow was at the scene when it happened. According to the unit report, the dog refused to leave for 4 hours. It took 4 people to pull him away. He was not physically injured. But from that day forward, he would not allow anyone to touch him. Not DEA personnel. Not the handlers who tried to work with him afterward. Not the staff at the 3 facilities he passed through before landing at Lone Star K9 in San Antonio 2 years ago. In those 2 years, he had put 4 staff members in the hospital. 1 required reconstructive surgery on his right forearm. 7 behavioral specialists in the region had declined to take his case. The director of Lone Star K9 had given the situation more time than protocol required. He was a thorough man who did not make irreversible decisions lightly. The paperwork had been signed 6 days ago. 72 hours remained. Elijah said, "On that phone call in November, I cannot get there anymore. There is no one else." He paused long enough that Denzel thought the line had dropped. Then he said, "I just want someone to go and look at him once before it is over. Someone who actually looks." Denzel said, "I will go." That was why he was standing in a parking lot in San Antonio in a gray hoodie, looking at a sign, settling something. He picked up his canvas bag from the back seat, closed the truck door, and walked inside. The woman at the front desk had a name tag that read Jasmine Okafor, and the look of someone who was working 2 jobs simultaneously, one of them visible and one of them internal. She was young, maybe 26, with short braids and round wire glasses and fingers that stopped moving on her keyboard the moment she looked up and then resumed after a half-second recalibration. She did not make a performance of recognizing him. He appreciated that. "Good afternoon. Do you have an appointment? I called this morning, Washington." I asked about the dog named Shadow. She pulled up something on her screen, read it, and her expression adjusted in a way that was professional and also honest. Mr. Tatum mentioned your call. Shadow is in our restricted ward. The director's policy on those animals is no outside visits. I understand. Is Mr. Tatum available? She picked up the desk phone. Reginald Tatum walked down the main corridor with the stride of a man who had spent 22 years building a system he believed in and was accustomed to defending it. He was 54 years old, compact and solid, salt and pepper hair, cut close, thin metal glasses, a khaki suit pressed to a sharpness that suggested he had made that decision every morning for years. His shoes were brown leather, recently polished. The wall of his office held 14 framed certificates and commendations, each hung level. 22 years in animal welfare, certification from the American Humane Association. Lone Star K9 Organization of Excellence Awards for 2019 and 2022. He recognized Denzel in the lobby and did not alter his pace. They shook hands. Tatum's grip was firm in the way of a man who considered it a statement of character. He led Denzel to his office, closed the door, gestured to the chair across from his desk, and sat down before Denzel had fully settled. A man who controlled the geometry of conversations. I understand why you're here, Tatum said, and I respect it. But Shadow is not a situation that sentiment can change. I'm not here out of sentiment, Denzel said. I'm here because a dying man asked me to come. Tatum looked at him for a moment. Then he folded his hands on the desk. The facts on Shadow are these. Belgian Malinois, 8 years old, former DEA K9. In 2 years here, he has sent 4 of my staff to the hospital. One of them had surgery on his forearm. I contacted 7 behavioral specialists across the region. Not one would take his case. I gave this animal more time than any dog in this organization's 14-year history. His voice was even and deliberate, the voice of a man who had made this argument before and found it sufficient and was not entirely comfortable with how it sounded today. The euthanasia order is signed. 72 hours. Tell me about Marcus Cooper. The name landed on the room and changed something in it. Tatum was still for 3 seconds. He took his glasses off, cleaned them on the hem of his jacket, put them back. You know the name. Marcus's father was my friend, Elijah Cooper. He died in December. Tatum sat with that. Outside the office window, a dog barked once in the main ward and went quiet. I did not know Mr. Elijah had passed, he said. I'm sorry. Before he died, he asked me to come here, not to save the dog, to go and actually look at it. That's what he asked. Denzel said it the way he said things that mattered, slowly and only once. I told him I would. Tatum was quiet for a moment. He tapped 2 fingers on the desk surface. Marcus Cooper was 29 years old, he said, and his voice shifted slightly, carrying something it had not carried a minute ago. His wife was 8 months pregnant when the notification came. A pause. I read that file the day Shadow arrived. I have read it several times since. Each time I finish, I have to get up and do something with my hands. The office was quiet. I want to see him, Denzel said. Not inside. Through the kennel. You stand right next to me. I'll sign whatever release you need. Tatum looked at him for a long time, not calculating. Something more careful than that. He exhaled through his nose. 5 minutes, he said. You stay behind the yellow line. The restricted ward ran along the west side of the building, behind a steel door marked in red letters. The corridor inside was colder than the rest of the facility by several degrees. The fluorescent lights overhead emitted a low-frequency hum that you felt in your back teeth before you consciously heard it with your ears. The kennels here were heavier than those in the main ward. Reinforced crossbars, narrower spacing. Each one had a white behavioral notation sheet taped to the wall beside it in red marker. Shadow's kennel was at the far end. It had 3 notation sheets and a strip of yellow adhesive tape across the floor 3 meters back from the door, the line no one crossed. Denzel heard Shadow before he saw him, not barking. Something rougher than barking, a sustained low tearing sound from deep in the chest, the sound of something that had been running its engine at maximum for so long that the engine itself was beginning to change shape. It was not the sound of anger. It was the sound of a system that had been set to one setting for too long and had forgotten the other settings existed. Then Shadow came into view. He stood in the center of the kennel, not the back corner where frightened animals retreat. The center, 4 legs planted, body coiled with a density that was impressive and terrible, black and tan coat gone slightly dull from months without sufficient sun. His ears were upright and forward. His muzzle carried a small curved scar from where he had bitten into the kennel bars. His eyes were amber and sharp, and in the first moment they found the strangers in the corridor, they did not register fear. They registered threat assessment. He hit the bars. The impact sound was like a car door closing at full force. The kennel shuddered. Tatum stepped sideways by reflex. Damon Reeves, the young staff member at the far end of the hall, put his hand on the tranquilizer rod racked against the wall. Shadow hit the bars a second time and a third, each time with the same full weight, the same zero calculation for the pain of it, the same absolute commitment to the message. Denzel did not step back. He stood behind the yellow line with his hands loose at his sides and watched. His shoulders were down. His face was open. He watched Shadow throw himself against the bars with the same steady attention he had brought to sitting with wounded soldiers in hospital rooms years ago. The attention of someone who understood that what looks like rage is sometimes just the only language a person has left when everything else has been taken. Shadow stopped. Not from exhaustion. He stopped in the middle of a motion, abruptly, the way a radio stops when something interrupts the signal. His chest was heaving. His nostrils opened and closed rapidly, pulling in something on the air. Something that had reached him through the full noise of his own fury and introduced a question his body did not have a ready category for. His head tilted, the smallest degree. Not calm, but different. Denzel reached into the canvas bag on his shoulder and took out a dog collar. Old brown leather, the metal clasp worn to a dark patina. It had belonged to a Labrador named Duke, who had died 14 months ago, the dog of a friend of his who had asked him to hold it. He had carried it since. He held it in his open palm and let the air carry what it would carry toward the kennel. Shadow moved to the front of the kennel. Not the lunge of before. The walk of a dog approaching something it does not understand and is deciding about. He extended his muzzle through the space between the bars, found Denzel's palm, and breathed in. Long and slow and thorough, the way a working dog reads information, cataloging, cross-referencing, processing something in a language that has no human equivalent. He raised his head and looked at Denzel directly. Something moved through those amber eyes. Not warmth, not recognition in any simple sense, but a shift in the quality of the attention, the way a room changes when a window opens. Shadow made a sound then that Damon Reeves said afterward he had never heard from that dog in 2 years. Not a growl, not a bark, a low trembling sound from somewhere behind the ribs, the sound of something that has been braced against weight for so long that it no longer remembers what it felt like before the weight arrived. Tatum, standing beside Denzel, put his hand over his sternum, a small and unself-conscious gesture. Denzel looked at the dog. "I want to go in," he said quietly. Tatum said nothing for a moment. He was watching Shadow, who was still standing at the front of the kennel, with his muzzle resting in the space between the bars where Denzel's palm had been. "Let me make some calls," Tatum said finally. He called Dr. Keisha Barnwell at Texas A&M at 4:15 that afternoon. She was chair of the Animal Behavior Sciences Department and had consulted for Lone Star K9 3 years prior. He described what he had seen in the corridor. He described it carefully and completely, the way he did everything, without embellishment and without omission. Dr. Barnwell listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Reginald, I have worked with K9 PTSD cases for 15 years. What you are describing does not happen by accident. That dog recognized something in that man. I cannot give you the full neuroscience of it, because we do not yet have the full neuroscience of it. But if Shadow responded the way you're describing, the least you can do is let him try." She agreed to monitor the session remotely via camera. She specified 2 conditions: full staff on standby with tranquilizer equipment, and Denzel must agree to exit immediately at any behavioral escalation with no discussion. Tatum found Denzel in the small waiting room off the restricted corridor, sitting with Jasmine Okafor, both of them holding paper cups of bad coffee. "Dr. Barnwell will observe online. Damon and I will be in the hall with equipment. You go in alone. First sign of escalation, you come out. No argument. Understood? And you understand this is your decision, your liability." "I do." Tatum unlocked the kennel door. Denzel entered at 4:49 in the afternoon. The moment the lock disengaged, Shadow was on his feet. Ears forward, weight forward, the low warning sound beginning in his chest. His body was coiled in the way it always was, spring that had been compressed, For so long it had taken on the character of its compression. His eyes tracked every inch of movement. Denzel stopped just inside the door. He did not make eye contact. Jasmine had explained this to him earlier, speaking quickly and precisely from 2 years of observation. Direct eye contact is dominance language, and this was not the time for dominance language. He looked slightly off to the side. Shoulders dropped, hands open and resting on his thighs. Then he sat down on the concrete floor. Not slowly, not with deliberate theater. He simply lowered himself and sat, cross-legged, back straight, the way someone sits when they have decided to be somewhere for a while. On the cold concrete floor of a restricted kennel in a gray hoodie, he looked like a man waiting for a bus. A man who was not in a hurry. A man who had nowhere else he needed to be. Shadow did not attack. He stood in the center of the kennel and watched Denzel with something that was not aggression exactly, but was not its absence either. His system had no file for this. In 2 years, every human who had entered this space had entered with tension in their bodies and speed in their movements, and the particular quality of attention that says, "I am here to do something to you." This man had entered and sat down. Denzel took the old leather collar from his pocket. He laid it on his knee without holding it toward the dog, without signaling. Just placed it there in the air of the kennel, in whatever direction the air was moving. Shadow took one step forward, then another. The steps had nothing of the controlled aggression of before. They were the steps of a dog moving toward something uncertain, careful and deliberate. The way you walk on a surface you are not sure will hold you. He came within arm's reach of Denzel and lowered his head to the worn leather on the man's knee and breathed in. Long, slow, thorough. He raised his head and looked at Denzel's face. "I know you lost him," Denzel said. His voice was low enough that no one outside the kennel could make out the words clearly. "I know what that is. To lose the one person who understood the specific thing you were." Shadow was still. His father was my friend. Good man. Best kind of man. The kind you don't always know how rare they are until they're gone. He paused. "I told him I would come. I came. 14 minutes passed." Shadow walked the remaining distance and pressed his head against Denzel's chest. Not a nudge. Not an ambiguous gesture. He pressed there and stayed, his breathing slowly changing, the rigidity in his shoulders releasing in the gradual way of something that has been held under pressure for a very long time and has finally found a surface that will hold the weight. Denzel's arms came up carefully around the dog's neck. Shadow trembled once, a single full-body shudder, and went still. In the hallway outside, Damon Reeves lowered the tranquilizer rod without noticing he had done it. Jasmine, watching on her laptop in the waiting room, typed into the chat window she had opened with Dr. Barnwell. "He is letting him hold him, doctor." Barnwell typed back 11 seconds later, "I have been doing this for 15 years. I have not seen this." Tatum did not sleep well that night. He sat in his office until 8:15 reviewing the camera footage. He watched the 14 minutes 3 times. He watched the way Shadow moved, the precise gradation from maximum threat to full stillness, the sequence of micro-decisions visible in the dog's body, if you knew what you were looking at. He had spent 22 years learning what he was looking at. At 6 the following morning, he called Dr. Barnwell. At 6:30, he called the organization's attorney. At 7, he sat at his desk with a form on it that was not the euthanasia order. When Denzel arrived at 8:03, he found Tatum at his office window. "Sit down," Tatum said. Denzel sat. Tatum remained at the window for a moment, then he turned. "I built this system on data," he said. 3 documented staff injuries, 7 specialist rejections, 2 years of behavioral deterioration with no reversal trend. Every protocol I have developed over 22 years pointed in one direction. He paused. "The data does not change. I cannot pretend last night changes the data." He crossed to his desk and pushed a document across it. "This is a conditional temporary transfer. Shadow enters a 90-day outpatient evaluation program under Dr. Barnwell's supervision at Texas A&M. You sign as responsible guardian for the evaluation period. If Shadow meets the behavioral benchmarks Dr. Barnwell specifies, we discuss permanent transfer. If he does not, or if there is any incident during the 90 days, the euthanasia order is reinstated. No extensions." He looked at Denzel directly. "You understand the difference between suspended and cancelled?" "I do." "Then sign." Denzel signed. Slowly, clearly, the way he signed things that mattered. Tatum picked up the document and looked at the signature for a moment, Then he set it down. "Marcus Cooper," he said. He was not looking at Denzel. He was looking at the wall. 29 years old. Wife 8 months pregnant when the notification arrived. He paused a long time. "I read that file the day Shadow came in. Every time I finish it, I have to stand up and do something with my hands." He picked up the document again and placed it in the folder on the right side of his desk. "Shadow will be ready for transfer at 9 tomorrow morning," he said. "I'll have Jasmine prepare the full behavioral record for Dr. Barnwell." The first 3 weeks were hard in ways Denzel had not fully anticipated. Shadow did not sleep. Denzel would hear him at 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, the quiet click of nails on hardwood moving from room to room in the dark, stopping sometimes in the middle of the floor for long stretches before moving again. Sometimes a low sound that Shadow seemed unaware he was making, a sound from somewhere far back in whatever the dog was running through behind his eyes, a warehouse in Helmand. Gunfire. A weight beside him on the ground that had slowly stopped being warm. Each time Denzel got up, he did not try to stop the pacing or redirect it. He simply walked into whatever room Shadow had moved to and sat down on the floor. No commands, no comfort that felt manufactured. Just, "I am here. Nothing needs to happen. I am not going anywhere." It cost him sleep. He paid it. By the 5th week, Shadow was pacing shorter distances. By the 7th, he had begun sleeping in the bedroom doorway, which was not inside the room and was not outside it, which was exactly what it was, a dog finding the specific position that was true to where he actually was. Dr. Barnwell came to Los Angeles twice in the first 2 months. She sat in the living room with a notepad and watched. She described what she observed in language that was careful and precise. Desensitization response, positive conditioning gradient, reduction in hypervigilance indicators. She said, "What I am seeing here does not fit neatly into the existing literature on canine PTSD recovery. The central variable appears to be the consistent presence of a specific individual. He has become the animal's safety anchor, which means it is not that you trained him. It is that he chose you, and that is rarer than most people know." On the 67th day, Shadow ran on the beach at Malibu. Denzel had not planned it. He had unclipped the leash. On a quiet stretch of sand south of the pier at the hour when the light comes in sideways and low and turns everything it touches the color of something worth keeping. Shadow had stood at the water's edge for 2 minutes looking at the waves. Then he broke into a full run down the shoreline. Ears flat, coat bright in the afternoon light, his whole body moving with a freedom it had clearly been storing somewhere and waiting for the right moment to spend. Denzel stood down the beach and watched him go. He had his hands in his pockets. His face was turned into the wind coming off the water. There was something in his chest that had been tight for a while and was not tight anymore. He thought about Elijah, not the last phone call, not the thinned-out voice at 11 at night. He thought about Elijah at 40 years old in that hospital room at Brooke Army Medical Center, sitting in the chair by the window with bad coffee and a paper cup, talking about nothing important and everything real for 47 minutes with a stranger who happened to come by that afternoon. He thought about how much that afternoon had mattered to both of them. He thought about how it was still mattering, 22 years later on a beach in Malibu, in the form of a Belgian Malinois, running full speed toward the water and then turning and running back. Shadow came back to him at full speed and stopped 3 feet away, sides heaving, tongue out, looking at him with those amber eyes that still had something watchful in them, but had something else in them now too. Denzel crouched down to his level. "Good," he said. "Just that. Just the word." Shadow pressed his head against Denzel's shoulder and stayed there for a moment, breathing. Jasmine Okafor moved to Austin 2 months after the transfer to work at a Veterans Family Support Center affiliated with UT Austin's clinical psychology program. She brought her thesis topic with her. She also brought the knowledge that Shadow existed and was doing something she had not been able to fully document yet but intended to. She called Denzel in late June. "There is a woman here," she said. "Her name is Desiree. Her husband was Marcus Cooper. Her son is 4 years old. His name is Elijah." She paused. "She has been trying to come to our animal-assisted therapy group for 3 months. She gets to the parking lot and cannot get out of the car." Denzel did not say anything for a moment. "What day is the next session?" "Friday, 2 o'clock. We will be there." They arrived at the Veterans Family Support Center on East Riverside Drive in Austin at 1:58 on a Friday afternoon in early July. The building was a converted storefront, wide windows, a hand-painted sign. The parking lot held a dozen cars. One of them was a dark blue Honda Accord, with a woman sitting in the driver's seat and a 4-year-old asleep in the back. Denzel parked and sat for a moment. Shadow was in the back seat, quiet, watching through the window. Then Denzel got out, opened the rear door, and Shadow stepped down onto the asphalt and walked beside him across the lot. He stopped by the blue Accord. He knocked on the window. Soft, the way you knock on someone's door when you are not sure you have the right to be standing there. Desiree Cooper rolled the window down. She was 34 years old, natural hair pulled back with a yellow scarf, dark eyes that were composed and exhausted and present all at the same time. She looked at him. Then she looked at Shadow standing beside him on the asphalt. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Shadow was Marcus's, Denzel said. Not a question. She nodded. Very small. He's doing well. He paused. He runs on the beach now. Something moved through her face at that. Not a smile. Something quieter and deeper than a smile. The expression of someone receiving a piece of information they needed and did not know they needed until it arrived. She opened the door and stepped out. Shadow did not move toward her. He stood and let her come to him, which was the thing he had learned to do, the thing he could not have done 8 months ago. When her hand came down on the side of his face, he tilted his head into it, giving her the weight of him, giving her what he had. In the back seat, Elijah Marcus Cooper Jr. woke up and blinked at the window and saw the large dog standing beside his mother and said in the specific declarative voice of a 4-year-old who has identified something important, "Dog." Desiree made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a cry, but was something that contained both. Denzel sat down on the curb beside the car. Shadow lay down next to him on the warm concrete, rolled slightly onto his side and closed his eyes. The full trust position. Belly partially exposed, forelegs loose and open. Dr. Barnwell had told him it was the most complete expression of safety a dog could show. Desiree sat down on the curb on the other side. The parking lot was quiet except for the traffic noise from Riverside Drive and the sound of a mockingbird somewhere in the live oak trees along the fence. The July light was heavy and gold, and everything it touched looked briefly like it was made of something that mattered. Elijah Jr. climbed down from the car and stood in front of Shadow and looked at him with 4-year-old seriousness for a long moment. Then he sat down cross-legged on the concrete the way his mother sat and put his small hand on the dog's side. Shadow breathed in. Shadow breathed out. Nobody said anything for a while. Denzel looked at the sky above the parking lot, the deep particular blue of a Texas July afternoon that has not yet made up its mind to go toward evening. He thought about Elijah on the phone in November, his voice thin and deliberate, spending what he had on the thing that most needed saying. He thought about what it means to keep a promise to someone who cannot see you keep it. He thought, he is watching. Then he thought about Marcus, 29 years old, a young man he had never met, the son of a man who had sat with him in a hospital room for 47 minutes and changed something in both of them without either of them intending it. He thought about the specific kind of courage it takes to follow a road your father walked, knowing what the road costs. Shadow shifted slightly on the concrete and pressed more of his weight against Denzel's leg. Denzel put his hand on the dog's side and left it there. 4 months after the transfer, Lone Star K9 Rescue announced the Marcus Cooper Second Chance Initiative, a behavioral rehabilitation program for dogs classified as unadoptable, developed in partnership with Dr. Barnwell's program at Texas A&M and the Animal Assisted Therapy Division at the Austin Veterans Family Support Center. Tatum presented it at the Texas Animal Welfare Coalition Conference in Houston in October. He did not read from notes. He said, "I built my protocols on the belief that there are animals beyond the point of return. I had data that supported it. I had 22 years of case history that codified it. And I was shown, by a dog that I had scheduled for euthanasia, that worst moments are real, but they are not the whole story. They are never the whole story." He paused. "I do not know that I was capable of hearing that until someone made me experience it. I wish I had been capable of hearing it sooner." Several people in the audience wrote that down. The first year, the initiative worked with 63 dogs. 38 were successfully placed. Some went to families. Some entered K9 therapeutic service programs, working with veterans and first responders and children in clinical settings. A few were transferred to search and rescue units. Shadow was not in any of these categories. Shadow was home. He slept on the couch when he thought Denzel was not looking. Denzel let him. He had an ongoing and entirely principled dispute with the squirrels in the yard, not violent, simply a matter of deep conviction and regular expression. He was genuinely fond of the woman who ran the coffee cart on the Malibu beach path, who kept treats in her apron pocket and called him sweetheart and always had time for him even when the line was long. He still had bad nights sometimes. The kind where something behind his eyes pulled him back to the cold ground in Helmand, back to the weight beside him that had slowly stopped being warm, back to the 4 hours he had spent unwilling to leave what he could not protect. He would wake panting, eyes wide, the past sitting heavy on him. And Denzel would be there, sitting on the floor in the dark with his hand on Shadow's back, not saying anything, not trying to fix it or explain it away, just staying, waiting for the past to loosen its hold the way it eventually does when the present is patient enough with it. On a Tuesday morning in November, almost exactly 1 year after Elijah Cooper had made that phone call, Denzel sat on the sand at the beach south of the Malibu Pier, at the hour when the sun has just cleared the canyon behind and the light is new and the water is still dark. Shadow was beside him, shoulder against his knee, head up, watching something in the middle distance that Denzel could not see. The ocean did what it always does, came in and pulled back on its own schedule, indifferent and consistent, and there. Denzel had the old leather collar in his hand. He turned it over slowly, feeling the worn seam, the cool weight of the clasp. He had never put it away. He held it for a while. Then he reached over and touched the collar around Shadow's neck. There was a small engraving on the inside of the tag, 4 words he had put there before bringing Shadow home from San Antonio. He knew them without reading them. What broke us is not all we are. Shadow turned his head and looked at him. Amber eyes, steady and present. The eyes of a dog who had learned something very hard and was still learning it, the way it is for anyone who is still learning it. Denzel scratched behind his ear. Shadow leaned into it with his full body weight, which he always did, as if making sure the contact was real. The sun finished coming up. The water went from dark to blue. Somewhere behind them, a kid on a bike rang a bell on the path, a small bright sound, briefly there and gone. They sat with the morning for a while, both of them still here. What this story is built on. The research on K9 PTSD is real. The Walter Reed Army Institute of Research documented stress response disorders in military working dogs beginning in 2011. Studies estimate that between 5 and 10% of dogs returning from combat deployments develop behavioral symptoms consistent with post-traumatic stress. Hypervigilance, unprovoked aggression, social withdrawal, and the loss of the ability to form new trust bonds. These are not metaphors. They are documented physiological and behavioral responses in animals whose nervous systems were not built to carry what they were asked to carry. The same is true for the people who handled them. Denzel Washington's connection to the military and to the Fisher House Foundation is a matter of public record. His visit to Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio in December of 2004 and his subsequent substantial donation to the Fisher House Foundation were widely reported and verified. The specific story told in this script, including Elijah Cooper, Marcus Cooper, Shadow, and Lone Star K9 Rescue, is fiction. It is built to feel like something that could be true, because it is built from things that are. The point is not Denzel Washington. The point is what he does in this story, which is the same thing that some people do in real life and that most of us have needed at least once. He sits down on the floor, in the cold, in front of something that might hurt him, and he stays. If you know a veteran, a K9 handler, or anyone carrying something that looks like danger from the outside and feels like grief from the inside, the Veterans Crisis Line in the United States is available at 988. Press 1. Sometimes the first step is just letting someone know you are in the room. If this story stayed with you, share it with one person who might need it today. And if you want more stories about what human beings are capable of when they choose to stay, subscribe. We put one out every week. We will be here.